Remember this?
And the Masters of the Universe.
And this?
G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
And this? And this?
My Little Pony, My Little Pony.
And who could forget this? These are what we call toyetic-based cartoons. Cartoons made with express purpose on selling toys. And today, we're going to look over 5 of them to see what it's like. Greens. I'm going Thomas 45 or Thomas More 45. You're watching Great One Podcast presents Down the Rabbit Hole. Oh, and this is Toyetic Boom of the 1980s.
Goodbye, Dinah. Goodbye.
Things are gonna get crazy.
So, before we get some things getting started, what does the term toyetic mean? Well, curious viewers, toyetic is actually a term that is used to describe something that's either made for the express purpose of making toys or is based off a toy itself. Alright, so for example, I'm just going to grab a random Hot Wheels here. Say this, for example, was a toy. It was made a TV show all about it. It would definitely be an odd idea, but it's not like it definitely has its purpose. And in the 80s, they were everywhere. There are way more than 5 shows, but there are 2 reasons why I'm only doing 5. One is that if I talk about every show here, we'd be here all day, and I don't have enough facts to go around. And 2, some of these shows didn't last very long, so there's not much to talk about them anyways. So, what does Toyetic Boom have? Well, I'll start back in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was elected president. And he was appointed CC chair to start deregulating regulations. And one of those things was allowing commercial advertisement to appear on kids' shows. Thus started the Toyetic Boom. But what's the first one we're going to talk about if that's all the stuff? Well, how about...
And the Masters of the Universe.
He-Man is very much a unique brand, and it was probably the manliest thing in the 80s. Yes, there are going to be a few gay jokes made at He-Man's expense. I'm sorry, I'm all for gay marriage and all, but even I can't help it. But still, He-Man is very much a toy that came here. He was built around that time when muscle-bound action heroes were the norm. Think back to characters like the Beastman, Conan the Barbarian, Ralph Bakshi's Fire and Ice. A muscle-bound tough guy was basically the thing of the 80s. Well, that and certain other attracted them. But I'm getting off topic. Okay? He-Man was made by Mattel, who at the time was in dire straits in a sense. Mattel Electronics basically had to close down due to the video game crash in 1983. And they needed a way for He-Man to basically become a success. Top out with this, they hired Filmation to make a cartoon about this. Filmation was more known at the time for making the Star Trek animated series and Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, so they weren't unknown to this. However, making an action show was something they hadn't made in a long time. But instead, they decided to use a few techniques. See? He-Man himself is Prince Adam. When he holds his sword up top, Prince Adam turns into He-Man himself. His cat, Cringer, turns into Bowcat, a fearless cat warrior instead of a shivering coward. He battles evils of Skeletor, whilst Grayskull on planet Nocturnia. As for friends and family. Now that's the basic premise of He-Man down, and I'm aware that not every episode follows the same plot, but I want to get the basic premise down in a way. Okay? He-Man himself also has a bit of power source in a sense, and is strong muscle back hero. Okay? Toys themselves were initially a success. Mattel, who at the time was most known for making Barbie and Hot Wheels, and still probably are, saw that toys were a success, and however, the success of toys was only temporary. He-Man and Masters of the Universe ran for 2 seasons and 130 episodes. However, by 1985, the toy market was getting a bit different. The Nintendo Entertainment System that came out that year was being marketed as a cool new toy that was being toy instead of a video game console due to the video game crash. It revitalized the video game industry, and unfortunately caused He-Man to be a bit different. In a result of that, the show was forced to adapt and make changes. To help with this, a TV movie was made at the same time to put a sequel series to He-Man, She-Ra, Princess of Power. Also created by Filmation, She-Ra was a bit different in a sense. Starring Aurora, Princess He-Man's sister, it's a bit complicated. Okay, she makes take down her forces down with them. Okay, She-Ra also started out successful too. However, it wasn't enough to save the He-Man brand during the 80s. In a last-ditch effort to help save it after the He-Man show, 2 things were created. One was a Christmas special that didn't really do anything of note, and the other was a movie. Masters of the Universe was not based off of He-Man, the TV show itself. It was more based off of toys. So that meant no Orko in the show, which would appear as a character there. And it also meant that the characters would be living in 1980s New Jersey instead of stuff. Dolph Lundgren, fresh off his role as Ivan Drago in Viking movies, decided to take on the role of He-Man, while Frank Langella decided to take the role of Skeletor. It was produced for Canon Films along with Superman 4: Quest for Peace. However, when it got released in 1987, the movie bombed at the box office heavily, and also gained very poor reviews from critics. It has gained a cult following, but there has yet to be found for it all. A sequel was in development, but it's unclear. Unfortunately, got cancelled when Canon Films closed down next to the failures of both Masters of the Universe and Quest for Peace. Afterwards, the He-Man brand lay dormant for about another 3 years when the New Adventures of He-Man came out in 1990. Unfortunately, Filmation did not come back. Why, you may ask? Well, in 1989, Filmation released a movie called Happily Ever After. It's complicated, but the basic idea is that Disney sued them for copying Snow White. Filmation won the lawsuit. However, because of how expensive the lawsuit was, they basically had to close down and thus making an end to Filmation. Instead, Jetlag Productions, who has made a bunch of low-budget animated films, took on the responsibility of animating the show. They gave He-Man a different look, adding him pants instead of wearing... Honestly, I have no idea what he wears sometimes. But, and giving Skeletor hair. Unfortunately, the series itself only ran for half the amount of episodes, and it didn't really do as well as the first one. He-Man went dormant again afterwards. He made appearances, and his storyline was revitalized a few times, but nothing came of the sorts. that wasn't until 2002 when a new series came along. Okay? This series was a bit more different than the previous one. Instead of being cast, it was a bit more ways. It saw Karen Clark, who is most well known for his book Ninja Turtles, as the voice of He-Man, and Kathleen Ball, who has done several voice acting works in the show as well. The reviews of the show were actually not bad. It did very well in reviews. Unfortunately, advertisement and bad time slots caused the show to fail. After 2 seasons and 39 episodes, the show was cancelled afterwards. He-Man did have a revitalization media, but it didn't seem to go great. Okay? A new TV series was made in 2000s on Netflix starring Lionfeld, most known for his voice in Ben 10 and as Spider-Man in the Sony games, came in to voice He-Man. The show itself actually did very well. Being released on Netflix, it didn't really seem to have much issues. It got cancelled after a few seasons, but it seemed to do well enough. Okay? There's been talks about a He-Man movie ever since, with many people casting it out. Okay? Unfortunately, there's not news for it. Although there is actually plans for it to actually be released in 2026. We just don't know who the cast or the crew is, so we have no idea what's going to happen to He-Man at that point. Right. But there is one last thing strand that does connect this, and that is the more modern She-Ra series movies. I'm aware that this isn't technically He-Man, but since the original She-Ra was linked to He-Man, I'm going to carry it here as well, okay? The new She-Ra series was now made by Dreamworks Animation and was going to be more of an anime-like style. It ran on Netflix and that series. What's up? Fans initially were giving backlash due to the redesigns. Honestly, I don't see what the issue was, honestly. She-Ra looks pretty fine and this looks pretty good. I guess because it makes She-Ra look a little like a teenager, but the series is never really clear on what that age is, so what if she looks like a teenager? It doesn't really bother me. The series itself, it has ran for several seasons on Netflix, and in the 20s, around the 20s. Okay? He-Man is still up for prominence in comics, and the new toy line is in the works of being launched in the movie, but He-Man definitely had wavered in. Okay? I think that the reason why He-Man's success has always waved up and down is because of how that because he was based on that macho trend that came in during the 80s. With properties like Conan the Barbarian and Beastmaster, so they were all made around the same time. And while yes, those properties are pretty awesome, they also are not always going to last forever. And I think He-Man also ran into an issue too. Once Magic was so saturated, it was probably to flop a bit more. It didn't have also the movie really didn't do He-Man any justice, making him into a walking gay stereotype basically.
It's this large. Lights on.
Wait a minute,
Yeah, I'm not even gonna bother making that joke. There's good news. He-Man himself is still successful in the modern eye, but even though he has gone up and down, there is no way to stop He-Man. But House of Grayskull, he will always fight back. Our next series takes us to the world of
G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
was basically Hasbro's answer to Barbie. However, unlike Barbie, I'm sorry, 1960s. If you were a kid in the 60s, like my parents, basically you had a G.I. Joe action figure growing up. G.I. Joe was a pretty cool toy in the sense. Well, not really toy, they were more action figures. What do you like to call Buzz Lightyear?
You're the real Buzz Lightyear, you're an action figure! You
Okay? They started out as 12-inch toys. Eventually you got shrinking down to 3 half-inch toys afterwards. They remained popular in the 60s and 70s. how come in the 80s, they were looking for a bit of a revival in a sense. So, in the sense as, they decided to make a team. However, they decided to make some 5 mini-episodes that would start the series. The series itself, it seemed that it worked out well enough to make a series. And as such, G.I. Joe, Young American Hero, started out in 1988. No, afterwards. It was in 1983. Released by Marvel Entertainment, and yes, that Marvel, if you don't know what I mean, G.I. Joe started life as a bit famous, along with toy brand, and it became a staple of the 80s. And also have the ending message of saying this.
Smart thinking.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
This is something to get to its basic things, and it was used to help out with small problems. The show was basically marketed as a way to do this, and it helped out in a lot of ways. G.I. Joe seemed to do very well for its first 6 seasons, and the 80s. Realizing this, they decided to make a movie afterwards. The movie was had a few things different. Originally, it was kind of a PG rated by killing off one of the main Joes, Duke. Unfortunately, due to the failure of Transformers, the movie, which we'll get to later, they decided to change it so that Duke ends up alive. They also scaled down some of the violence, and instead of releasing it theatrically, they released it direct-to-DVD video afterwards. Unfortunately, this also meant the end of G.I. Joe. A 4th season did not come out afterwards, and everything was. But the show was successful enough that a sequel series was made not too long afterwards. Produced by Toyetic Entertainment, who also at the time was more known for making using Inspector Gadget in the real Ghostbusters. Toyetic Entertainment decided to roll. Okay. Now, Toyetic has had several successful shows like Inspector Gadget, the real Ghostbusters, and Agency 31, but it's unclear how I in the show. It ran for seasons, and well, unfortunately after this, G.I. Joe took a bit of a hibernation. That wasn't in 1985 when a reboot to toy brand came out, called G.I. Joe Extreme. Meant to try in with the cool 90s era and stuff. G.I. Joe Extreme basically was a skew of what happened afterwards. Fortunately, the toy brand had a series was made to tie in it, being half live action, half animated, if that makes any sense to me. However, like the movie brand, G.I. Joe Extreme only lasted 2 seasons from 1996 to 1997, and is a pretty odd show to run into. Afterwards, G.I. Joe would basically lay dormant. That wasn't until the movies came out starring Channing Tatum. G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra and Cobra came out in 2009. While gained mixed reviews from critics, audiences and fans seemed to eat up in droves as it was very successful at the box office. And they followed the sequel in 2015. Fortunately, the sequel did not live up to expectations. Instead, Channing Tatum was in the movie, The Rock took over as the main character. And unfortunately, the sequel did not do well at the box office. Thus, we end two at the box office of the 3rd movie that was going to come out afterwards. G.I. Joe still seemed to poke eye. Unfortunately, though, there hasn't been a new series in a long time. And unfortunately, that's kind of a consequence that G.I. Joe itself hasn't really stayed up. But the always plans been show, there hasn't been talks since the original was ever get a new show in the month. Not too bad though. As the brand is successful and it's still making merchandise up to this day, and it doesn't help that also G.I. Joe can't really die at a poke age. There's always ways to make it more and more successful as the years go on. The original fans of G.I. Joe have used and no one's have fed out as a popular meme on the internet. And many of the clips have actually become famous memes themselves. So, at least the show has gained a lot. Okay? And we'll get more into more of these shows. Our next series takes us to the Transformers. Okay? Basic plot rundown is that between two warring factions. The Decepticons, or the evil guys, and the Autobots, the good guys. Cons are led by Megatron and trying to take over with a Cybertron. Where the good guys are the Autobots, led by Optimus Prime. Right, okay? The two orbits for a long time. And I was saying, I have been warring basically since this began. Yeah. Okay. The whole idea of Transformers is that they can transform into other machines. Optimus Prime himself can transform into a Cybertruck. Bumblebee, another one, can transform into a sleek car, and Megatron can transform into a gun. Well, he could at first, now he can't. Another neat catch was himself. Because these Transformers could transform on their own, it became obvious to us how this could work. Look. With them, they can actually fight, hence the term robots in disguise. Alright, so to what we're talking to with He-Man, Transformers was launched as a toy line first by Hasbro and Takara Tomy, then a TV series, and then we'll go into comics afterwards. The TV series was just Transformers, also brought some things that would become staples of the franchise, including having Peter Cullen do the voice of Optimus Prime, and Frank Welker do the voice of Megatron. Frank Welker is probably more known for being the voice of Fred and Scooby-Doo in the Scooby-Doo franchise. At the same time, other voice actors will come in and help out. But some of the cast that came the series itself was a huge hit, with the animation means Japan, while Marvel Entertainment handled a lot of the other shows. And yes, Marvel as in that Marvel, as in the comic book company and the creators of the MCU. So yeah, let's not get in and beat about the bush. Well, afterwards, the series did very well, continuing over 3 seasons. Partway through its second season, a movie came out in the same time. Titled Transformers the Movie, this movie went to be kind of a unique hit, getting rid of the old slate and working with the new. Okay? They did this by killing off a lot of the characters, including Optimus Prime and Starscream, as well as having Megatron turn into Galvatron at the same time. And many fans were more divisive on these changes, but they have still adapted them. The movie itself, though, has become a classic for Transformers fans. It's also a very 80s movie. To amp up the tone a bit more, as long as the killing, swear words were included too to give it a PG rating. Words like hell, damn, and shit were all copied in there to make it a bit more aimed at adults.
Oh shit, what are we gonna do now?
However, in some of the cuts, they would cut these words out to appeal more to family markets. Another thing that they had was a soundtrack, including Touch by Sam Bush, a Hollywood rock version of Transformers theme done by Lion, and Weird Al's Dare to Be Stupid. I would play them, but then again, copyright and all, so let's not get into that. Afterwards, this all came ahead though, and the movie was released in 1986. Unfortunately, the movie did not do well financially, and actually, critics gave a bit favorable towards it, but it gave mixed reviews at times. Today though, it is a cult classic of many Transformers fans, and it's easily considered one of the best properties out there, as well as probably the most 80s themed Transformers, and that is saying something. Afterwards, Transformers franchise will come back with a third season. However, due to fan backlash, Optimus Prime was brought back in this series in some form, along with making the Ghost of Starscream a recurring presence in that season. Unfortunately, this also proved to be the last of the series, as it got cancelled without appearing to the 4th season. Don't feel bad though. The comics kept the toy line alive, and the toy line remained successful nonetheless. Hasbro continued afterwards in the 90s to make a new batch of Transformers. The first batch, which is known as Gen 1. So this batch is going to be called Gen 2, and instead it's more based on what the Beast era has. An OVA was also made at this time, but to get down the idea, Now, this one was called Beast Wars, and was made by with Beast Wars having several different sets. Beast Wars was made by a different company. Instead of having being hand drawn, it would be more computer animated. Being one of the first computer animated series called around the same time, along with Reboot, that was made by the same studio. We also had a mostly Canadian cast. Gary Chalk, who plays Pierre Cullen as Optimus Prime. David Kay, who is more known playing Clank in Russian Clank games, takes on the role of Megatron. Ian James Collette, who at the time was also working for Mainframe Entertainment as Bob in Reboot, took on the role of Cheetah, with many other voice actors including Michael Dobson and Scott McNeil, also playing roles in the show too. It became obvious that this show was vastly different. Instead, it follows a different set of characters too, having must be more beast forms. Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal, and other animals changed these too, being set in times. This was intended to be a continuation, but there is some similarities. As for CGI itself, well, okay, there's no hiding. It does look pretty rough, all things considered, and this is easily early 90s and late 90s CGI. It's point where, yeah, you can tell that it's not the best quality. However, it was a revolution at the time, as this was one of the earliest CGI series, along with Reboot, to be made, and it was a success nonetheless. The series ran for 52 episodes, and contained another series called Beast Machines that were changed afterwards. Okay, along with shows that after the same time, like Beast afterwards. Unfortunately, Machines didn't last as long as the ones Machines, and only ran for 26 episodes and 2 seasons. Afterwards, they came back in comics section. However, one thing that revitalized them in public eye was a 2007 movie directed by Michael Bay. The 2007 movie brought back some elements. Pierre Cullen and Frank Welker played the roles as both Optimus Prime and Megatron, as well as casting characters. Weirdly enough, the human characters became more prominent too, with Shia LaBeouf basically having a main character sense in a sense too. Let's see. The movie is, I think the way action movies go, it's actually very good the way it is. It's very much fun to watch, and it's very good movie, and it's a very fun movie to watch. However, it also has it is still a Michael Bay action flick, and it does prioritize the action over everything else. Still though, as it goes, it's not terrible. In fact, it's actually pretty cool. That's the movie led to a few sequels, with the first one being released as Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Fallen, which really did help out. Okay? An animated series called Transformers Animated came out around the same time as the first Transformers movie. Running for 42 episodes, Transformers Animated seemed to do a bit different. Okay? Optimus Prime was now voiced by David Kay, who was voiced Megatron. Ratchet, another character, was voiced by Corey Burton. Bulkhead was voiced by Bill Fagerbach, who is more known for playing Patrick Star on SpongeBob. and RC was voiced by Susan Blue. And Bumblebee himself is voiced by Bubba Robinson. As Megatron himself is voiced by Coy Burton, or Starscream himself is voiced by Tom Kenny. The series itself, it came successful and ran for 38 seasons and from 2008. Right after this series came out, a new series came out now afterwards called Transformers Prime, bringing back Pierre Cullen as Optimus Prime and Megatron. It came out around the same time after Transformers went to the Fallen, and it seemed to do about very well. Well, it was a bit. Bring back what's elements to the show itself. But watching an episode of the series, it definitely has a kind of charm. Instead of being characters, instead some new teams that help out in the same ways. It's a bit odd to do this, but still, it can help me out nonetheless. House. They ran for 3 seasons with the show. The original one stuff coming later afterwards. A film was also coming on without it becoming a conclusion, Predacons Rising, ending the series in 2013. A third movie came out afterwards, Transformers Dark Knight. With it coming out in some ways, Michael Bay and Transformers were proven to be successful. Okay. Afterwards, another series, Transformers Wars in the Skies, came out afterwards. It was more of a sequel to Transformers Prime, but still did better nonetheless. Afterwards, Michael Bay released his 4th movie that entered extinction into While previous films previous 2 films really didn't get good reviews. In fact, as it came out, less and less Transformers films were being liked. They were still pumping out money, with the 4th Transformers film having a budget of $210, made over $1 billion, making it the highest grossing film of 2014. And it was followed by one more sequel on Michael Bay with Transformers Last Night. Unfortunately, the last one would prove to be the last time Michael Bay would work with the franchise, as the reviews were also bad, and for the first time, the audiences didn't come back, as only $605 million were being made, the lowest amount of these franchises. Instead, a different franchise. Instead, prequels made instead named Bumblebee. Bumblebee itself actually gained much better reviews than the other ones, and afterwards, a sequel to Bumblebee would come out not long afterwards, Transformers: Rise of the Beast. Unfortunately, this one didn't do so well at the box office, only getting $441 million on a $200 million budget. Afterwards, it seemed that things were going to get a bit different. That is, until Transformers 1 came out in 2024. Starring Chris Hemsworth, who is most well known playing Thor in the MCU as Optimus Prime. It serves as an origin story for Optimus Prime and Megatron, having them be best friends before their war with Planet, which has always been an element of the series. Megatron himself was voiced by Brian Tyree Henry, who I mostly know from the Spy-Verse movies as Miles Morales' dad. Other actors came too, like Keegan-Michael Key, Scarlett Johansson, John Hamm, and Steve Buscemi as some of the characters. The movie itself actually was a great hit with critics, as critics loved it, as it became critics. At the box office, unfortunately, it did not do well. It flopped heavily, and I'm not sure if a sequel's coming out, but it does seem like people are also starting to get tired of the Transformers films. Before I learned of Transformers films, you can't really kill them, because Transformers brand is always going to have even with the recent flop of Transformers 1, I'm sure there's something about Transformers afterwards. Transformers 1. And know that there. Although I didn't see Transformers 1, I am planning to see it at some point. So we have that to worry about. And plus Transformers franchise will probably never die. Like He-Man and G.I. Joe, it's just a property enough where I can believe that there'll be another Transformers project on the way. Our next project takes us to the magical world of ponies in
My Little Pony, My Little Pony, all in a
My Little Pony. But before we get to My Little Pony, we'll learn about a few more and a few other shows. Let's get into those shows after the break.
Now, a raging terror grabs hold of the universe. Monstroid. When Monstroid gets wound up, it grabs, it lurches, it spins, and thrashes. Because just like Hordak, it's bad.
I love it. I'll stop it.
Monstroid.
Got it.
New from the Masters of the Universe. You put it together. Action figures sold separately from Mattel. It's a grabber.
Perfect. And we're back. Now, My Little Pony is definitely the one. As the series itself started out with the first series being Pony. So to the other three series, talk about G.I. Joe, and Transformers, these ones was also made by, you guessed it, Hasbro. And it was also made by Summer Productions and Marvel, who was also doing G.I. Joe. It was the fantasy series. Fantastic King. Stars and has still been top ones, okay? Cast members, okay? Who themselves will have several roles in the future. Sure. Lucy Taylor voiced Cupcake, who is more well known playing the voice of Minnie Mouse for years. Nancy Cartwright, who voiced Gutsy, and Posey later on will do the voice of Bart Simpson. And Scott Menville, who will be one Daddy, will later become Robin in Teen Titans. So overall, the cast was pretty prolific, even if these were basically the kind of earlier roles. The series itself became successful and ran for 2 seasons from 1987. Okay? There's also a movie that came out around the same time, afterwards. The movie itself was basically meant to be a finale in a sense to the whole thing. Released around 1986, it was meant to kind of function with some even bigger voice actors at the time, including Madeline Kahn, Rhea Pullman, and Pullman's famous actors group Danny DeVito. Yes, that Danny DeVito. Okay? Unfortunately, like Transformers movie, it didn't do super hot only making $6 million on a $5 million budget. Now, the franchise though, toys themselves remain successful. With the ability to have a series was made called My Little Pony Tales, made during the 90s and went for 26 episodes. It was a smaller series, but continued on the set ideas with a new cast and all. Okay? However, probably what you're all waiting for is probably the series that I have yet to talk about at all in this whole group. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Probably the most well-known My Little Pony franchise, as this franchise during 2010s. And features a very cast. Surprisingly enough, a lot of them are Canadians. So I actually have grown up with some of these people before, including Ashley Ball, Tim Jermaine, Nicole Oliver, and some others who have all played the show. As for the show itself, Magic, well, there's no hiding on it. It's a great show. It really captures the idea of what it is. and apparently made a huge fandom with bronies everywhere. I know that the fandom can be a bit questionable, but we're not going to talk about that part of the fandom part just yet. As spoiler, it's not really important. Magic would even release some films afterwards. Equestria Girls in 2012, and of course, 2012, and its own movie in 2017. With the main cast still playing the roles. Okay? Notably, these movies are a bit unique in a sense, and they still contain this cast. Afterwards, the series itself run for a total of 9 seasons and 221 episodes. Afterwards, a sequel series was made not long afterwards for Treehouse TV called Pony Life, which features some returning actresses like Tara Strong, Ashley Ball, and Frances Germain, and several others coming back as some characters. Each episode was now 11 minutes long instead of 22 minutes long, and was aimed more or less at a younger audience. It only ran for two seasons of 40 episodes compared to the monstrous amount the other one did, but it still meant to work. Afterwards, a new movie came out with Gen 5, starring the movie My Little Pony: New Generation. Instead of having Magic, a whole new cast of characters was made instead. With some new actors coming to help the movie get a few more marketability with more information. Just like Vanessa Hudgens, Kimiko Glenn, James Morrison, Ken Jeong, and Michael McKean, all doing voices of at least some ponies. Additionally, it became a good 7 point and basically helped out as a pilot for the show. It was mostly released on Netflix due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So a sequel series was made around the same time, titled Make Your Mark. Make Your Mark would feature some cast members to a different cast instead. Due to them, being popular actors and all, a new cast was made instead. Okay, the series itself ran for 4 seasons and 27 episodes. With a brand new the web series was called Tail, starring the same cast. Today, My Little Pony is a bit of an odd franchise. Starting off in the 90s as kind of a slow burner, not really having much success selling. But then thanks to Patrick Magic and the success of that franchise, My Little Pony was able to stay relevant in the modern era. And watching Patrick Magic going up, it was a great series. Granted, I didn't get into the whole franchise going up, but I liked it enough where the characters were. And although I stopped watching when I did get older, I will say that Patrick Magic is a very good show nonetheless. And I will say this, even though the other shows, Pony has always stayed. Those franchises that you really can't hate nowadays. And it's also a nice bench point for where the series will come off. We have one last show to talk about, and it's a big one. Well, my other shows may have had this one still has a fan base. So everybody, please put your hands together for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay? I'm pretty sure you all know the concept of TNT. 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fight a mutated bot hit by mutagens. Trained by the Master Splinter, a rat, they all try to learn the ninjutsu and ninjutsu Renaissance artists Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael in order to fight Shredder and his enemy Rose Gallery villains. But it didn't originally start out as a toy brand. No. It was started as a comic series. Created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, the series was basically a comic idea of a raccoon of what comics were. appearing in series like Daredevil in a sense. In fact, there actually are a few connections to Daredevil and the TNT. For one, many people have theorized, and it's even been confirmed in some instances, that the same ooze that was used to mutate the turtles was also used to blind Daredevil. Not only that, but Daredevil himself was done by a master named Hand, while the turtles by a member called it the Foot. But let's get into Mulan. They originally published under Mulan Studios, titled that way because it wasn't an actual studio. It was instead just the apartment where they would sketch out the turtles. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were basically working without any budget whatsoever, and actually made the first set of drawings on some napkins. They went to sell it and then sell it afterwards. And much to the shock, it actually became a hit. Yet the concept was goofy enough to actually spawn a series of action figures. Afterwards, with Playmates toys. More comics were released afterwards, introducing new characters, including a scientist named Baxter Stockman and a lab assistant named April O'Neil. Okay, who become a huge ally towards the turtles. At the same time, the turtles themselves remained basically the same. They all wore the same red masks, and they all had the same personalities. They were basically interchangeable, other than the usual outside of it. In fact, the designs were almost identical. Okay? It wasn't until 1986 when they pushed the idea of making a TV show based on toys after Playmates Toys basically started using some toys to turtles. To help make this series a bit more they decided to add a few changes. For one, turtles were changed up instead. Instead of having them all have the same masks, they would all change colors. Raphael would still keep the red mask, but Leonardo's mask would turn blue, Donatello's purple, and Michelangelo's is orange. Personalities were also changed around. Leonardo was made a stern leader of the group, being the most mature and the most in charge. Donatello was given a genius-level intellect, becoming the master of machines and brains. Raphael was given a snarky, sardonic edge, being the more of the wisecracker group. And Michelangelo was given more of a silver dude accent at the same time. Other elements were changed, including making April O'Neil go from a lab assistant to a news reporter, and giving turtles a love of pizza as well. The series began in 1987 with 5 episodes of stuff. It was such a success, in fact, that second season was already greenlit with 30 episodes by afterwards. But while that season was going in production, another thing came in production too. A movie. The movie itself was a bit an idea. Titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie was made afterwards to see. Next. Unfortunately, not many people picked it up, and it became mostly known as an independent movie. The movie itself, however, seemed to get notoriety. Jim Henson's Creature Shop helped out with the name. While afterwards, it came out as something that was a bit different. Okay? Cast included some played the Gerard Hogg as April O'Neil, Elias Keith Torres as Casey Jones, who was introduced in comics long before that as a vigilante, James Saito as Shredder, and a young Sam Rockwell as a thug in the movie. As for Turtles themselves, because of Creature and Trunks, they decided to use cast members to see if they can help out on cast members. As the Turtles themselves were using creature effects by Jim Henson Company. Brian Tochi did the voice of Leonardo, Corey Feldman did the voice of Donatello, Josh Page did the voice of Raphael, and Robbie Rist actually did the voice of Michelangelo, with Kevin Clash puppeteering and also being the main voice of Mentor Splinter. There was also another change they added to Turtles 2, and that was to Raphael. Previously, he was the wisecracking stoker of the group. However, in this movie, he was made more aggro and aggressive. This idea kind of decided to stay as long as for one, it helped out. One, it gave him a different personality, Michelangelo, of being a goofball, and two, it gave them a different edge. Within after a rivalry with Leonardo at times too. Other times, the movie itself, however, was basically a kind of idea afterwards. It was more mature than the TV series. It allowed us to say some swear words. After a movie came out, it gained mixed reviews from critics. Roger Ebert famously put that although he wasn't a huge fan of it, he basically had kind of name afterwards. However, it was a monster hit at box office, getting $202 million on a budget of just $13.5 million, making it at the time the highest grossing independent film. It was followed up afterwards with a sequel movie called Secret of the Ooze. Because of complaints of the previous film, it was toned down in terms of the action. Judith Hoag did not come back as April O'Neil. Although no clear evidence is given, a lot of people say that she was hard to work with, although it's unclear why. Instead, Paige Turco took on the role instead. Casey Jones was written out entirely. Instead, Ernie Reyes Jr. played a new character named Kino. Okay? And some Baxter Stockman was in the movie itself. However, that plan was changed. Instead, Professor John Perry was taken up instead. Okay? Instead, two new mutants round with Toka and Razor, two mutated wolf and stepping and alligator stepping tail. As for another thing that was changed was that it was Shredder coming back. In the previous movie, he is basically dead. Like he is knocked off a building, and then for good measure, Casey Jones put a garbage truck through him. I guess I to ignore the events in the previous film with that, since Shredder decides to still live around. But the only change was that on call when he plays Connie Feldman, who at the time was recovering from drugs at the time. Laurie Fraser also did the voice of Raphael, as John Pies was too busy with projects. Brian Toshi and Robbie Riss both came back as Leon respectively. The film itself also was a lot more silly. We're still at PG rating, there was some things changed. It was made a lot more goofier for kids. It was given a much lighter tone, and Vanilla Ice was sent to start making a ninja rap at the same time. The movie itself was a bit more. At box office, it was still a hit. Despite having a budget that was almost double what the previous film had, it made $78 million, which made a hit on box office. Critics, however, did not like this film, unfortunately, and it got poor reviews from critics. Hunter Master in the Bags, the poor tone, and also having a bit more of a goofier nature. Luckily, though, it had enough money to become a success, and a third movie called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 came out around the same time. This time, Casey Jones did come back also played by Chez. Paige Turco returned as April O'Neil. Corey Feldman, who had recovered by time, came back as Donatello. Okay. Well, Tom Kelleher came in as Raphael, and James Murray had played Splinter. It seems that now that people are starting to get a little turtled out. The movie itself gained terrible reviews from critics. And because Jim Henson's Creature Shop did not come back for the previous film was dedicated to Jim Henson's memory, the film itself, unfortunately, used much cheaper effects when they were Instead of fighting Shredder, they went to Field Japan. The critics did not hold back on it just like this movie, giving it mainly negative reviews. It also didn't do great at the box office, having plans for a fourth movie in time. The anime series, though, was still successful, as it seemed to do well afterwards. With the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth series coming out at the time. However, there were changes that came out afterwards, trying to appeal to more kids. In response to the violence on TV, in the UK, instead of being called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it was called Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Michelangelo was also no longer using nunchucks, instead using a turtle whip instead. A kid named Zack was also added, known to be Turtles' biggest fan. Unfortunately, things didn't stick around. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles did stick around in the UK as it came in its name afterwards. But both the Turtle line and Zack were scrapped after the words, making it much different afterward. The series itself also ran to another issue afterwards with the movies no one coming out. A fourth movie was planned called Emancipation, however where the characters could easily jump. Raphael gained more raptor-like appearance, where the others would mutate more. Okay, this movie would have been a little different. The series will continue on for 9 seasons and 20 seasons and run for a total of 193 episodes. So, what happened after TMNT? Well, enter Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation. Yes, this is different from the previous one. Ninja Turtles: Next Mutation was made by Saban and was a bit different in a sense. Instead of being animated, it was live action. And was made a lot more of a unique sense. Okay, besides, it was, instead of being teenagers, the Turtles are now 18 years old. They also are no longer blood brothers in a sense, being more brothers in the team sense. However, the biggest departure, which were the fact that both April O'Neil and Casey Jones were absent, and there's a fifth turtle named Venus de Milo. She was raised as a mystical ninja or a shinobi, and oftentimes as things that do tends is a bit and can do magic at the same time. Now this series itself, unfortunately, was not a success. In fact, it became an instant flop with both critics and audiences of Team and fans of TNT franchise. It only lasted 26 episodes, and of those 26 episodes, 2 of them were clip shows. It also had collaboration with Power Rangers in Space, and it's called Shell Shocked, which is how I'm aware of the franchise. Really though, the cast is different. Okay? The cast was mostly a Canadian production, being that it was filmed in Vancouver, British Columbia. Yeah. But it didn't seem to matter. Okay? Peter Laird also once said, as I mentioned, being smile on Kenneth East, as well, it kind of became a mistake afterwards. Afterwards, they decided to let Turtles lay dormant for a few years. Yes. As it remains one of the biggest question marks in the series' company. That wasn't until 2003 when an anime series came out at the time. Okay, this one was a bit different, being a bit darker and more in tone. Okay, the characters themselves have personality in check. Leonardo being the leader, Donatello being the brains, Raphael being the hothead of it, being now confirmed to be more the hothead of the group after the movies, and Michelangelo being the jokester, with Splinter now being members. April O'Neil was now changed from from the nation of her being a news reporter to her now being a lab assistant again. Okay. Is that okay? Now they have to try to have a bit more of a different take. Is that okay? The series is a lot darker. I actually grew up watching the series big times, and I remember having some fun with it. Granted, it was a very season beforehand, but it was fun watching this series when I was growing up. Okay? As this was basically the Teenage Ninja Turtles show from the 2000s. It actually ran for 4 seasons with a storyline, and concluding with a 5th season called Ninja Tribunal that, a 6th season title Fast Forward was a bit different. Casey O'Neill will no longer get the series, but instead a more some version of Casey April Cody Jones was instead. The series would end up going back in 2007. At the same time, the series was in the 7th season. A movie came out at the time called TMNT, made by Emoji Entertainment. TMNT was a bit okay. It was the first of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film to be computer animated at the time. With James Arnold Taylor as Leonardo, Mike Mitchell Whitfield as Donatello, Nolan North as Raphael, and Mikey Kelly as Michelangelo. With many at the same time, including Kevin Smith, Patrick Stewart, Tim Geller, and Chris Evans, and Marco in his final film role. Okay? It seems that this film did prove to be more successful. While it didn't get Emoji Entertainment didn't get successful, thanks to give it mixed reviews. It was a success. It was a more commercial success, gaining around $95 million. A sequel was planned, however, there were 2 major reasons why. After 2009, Nickelodeon bought the franchise after 2009. It didn't have also Emoji Entertainment closed down after the Astro Boy movie came out at the same time. And bombed at the box office. So, what did Nickelodeon do with the franchise after? Well, after the series was cancelled, that being directed by featuring a different. The series itself is very much more a modern Turtles, having a bit more of an anime-like style and adding to new ideas. It actually features a pretty prominent cast. Bob Holston, who actually previously voiced Raphael in the 87 series, comes back as Donatello. Greg Sipes, who is most known for playing Beast Boy in Teen Titans, is voiced by Michelangelo. Sean Astin, who has done many famous roles, but I personally know Bob from Stranger Things, does the voice of Raphael. And Jason Biggs did the voice of Leonardo. However, due to comments he made afterwards, Biggs was replaced by Seth Green fully afterwards. Okay? Other actors afterwards, including Hoon Lee as Splinter, and Mae Whitney, who is also known for playing the voice of Katara in Avatar's Airbender, and Emily Blight in The Owl House. Okay? Well, the series itself, well, actually, I'm actually starting to even though I'm not watching it right now, I've actually been watching it recently. And I can tell you one thing, it's one of the best TNT adaptations out there. Turtles mainly stuff. Leonardo is still the leader of the group. Donatello is the brains. Raphael is the aggro, and Michelangelo is the more fun guy. The series itself introduced a whole new generation of 2010s to TNT, running for 5 seasons and 124 episodes. So in 2014, a new movie came out, directed by Michael Bay again. He's back. Okay. This is also meant to be a reboot of the franchise in a sense. The first Michael Bay movie was very different. In a sense. Giving Turtles a more gritty, gross design in a sense. It continues on with a bit things. Not only that, but it does make it a bit of a darker adaptation more of a dark out here. And the film itself gained poor reviews from films. However, it did kind of huge box office, gained $485 million on a 20 budget, on a 100 budget. They made a sequel on afterwards. The cast is previous one. Unfortunately, the sequel did not do well. Only making $145 million on a $125 million budget. Michael Bay stepped away from making films afterwards. After the came around, and a new series came out afterwards titled Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Turtles was a bit different. Okay, instead of having a bit more of a cast, instead it took a cast. The Turtles were now a bit more different. Okay, Raphael was now made the leader of the team and was voiced by Omar Ben-Similla. Leonardo was made the team's second command. And he's voiced by the same person who does Sonic, Barry Schwartz. Hello, was filming a small turtle group. Okay. And he was now voiced by Josh Brenner. He was also made around the same age as Leonardo, making him act more like twins in a sense. Michelangelo was voiced by my set as made the youngest at being 13 or 14 years old. He is as the youngest, he's still a juvenile fun guy who Splinter comes back voiced by Eric Bowser, who's a mentor. Well, Neo has a bit more, okay? Unlike beforehand, Neo is about the same age as the Turtles, similar to the 2012 series. And even Neo himself also has to change into a mixed race human. It's kind of a homage to comics in a sense, as comics kind of give her a bit of a darker skin books. Although fans were also not into this change due to the same reasons why anything is normal. Okay? Luckily though, she's voiced by Kat Graham in the show itself, and it is show itself. The series itself ran for 39 episodes over 2 seasons, with a movie that came out afterwards. Rise of the Teenage Mutant Turtles movie, which was the one that the series off. Lena was now made the leader team instead afterwards, and it basically served as an ending to the series afterwards. Afterwards, it was a new series movie came out afterwards called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Yeah. Okay. Created by Jeff Lowe, Evan Goldberg, and Seth Rogen, the movie itself was basically a new origin story for the Turtles, giving them a bit more of a darker and grittier look, and adding a bit more currently closer to the movies without wasting time, including having them back with characters. This time, instead of being voiced by adults, the characters were actually voiced by actual teenagers. Like Abby took the role of Donatello, Shane Brown Jr. took the role of Michelangelo, Nicholas Cantu took the role of Leonardo, and Brady Noon took the role of Raphael. Okay. O'Neal, someone friend nonetheless, and was voiced by Ayo Edebrie. Okay. And then other characters came back, including Maya Rudolph, Seth Rogen himself, John Cena, Jackie Chan, Ice Cube, Paul Rudd, and even Kevin Eastman himself appeared as one of the roles. Okay. Again, it does. Sorry, with the Turtles now being off on their first adventures and first meeting April O'Neil, along with the movie itself beginning with a different villain than Shredder, with it having Superfly instead be the main villain. Okay? Who has this whole grand villain who basically controls the city. As for myself, as a person who actually watched the movie, it's really good actually. It actually fits perfectly with the tone of the movie. It works out great. Hey, It works out as a great origin story for TMNT. Okay? And a lot of the characters feel like themselves. It's also good to see how the Turtles act themselves with. Which is, okay? Okay? Leonardo is a very reluctant leader and tries his best to become a leader, but it doesn't work. Michelangelo is still the fun-loving goofball who wants to embrace the humans as much as he can. Donatello is a smart, thinking more who has a bit of time to self-confidence at times. And Raphael is still the top leader, ask question, fight first kind of person. So, music was done by Nine Inch Nails members Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. And the movie itself did very well for itself. As critics gave it great reviews, it's become one of the best reviewed movies out there. And it made $180 million on a $70 million budget. And afterwards, a follow-up series called Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was released, with most of the cast coming back. Splinter himself now has spoke to a Jewish language. Womack Abbey still voices Donatello, Shannon Brown Jr. voices Michelangelo, Gus Cantu voices Leonardo, Brady Noon voices Raphael, and Ayo Adebrie voices O'Neill, with the series itself having so far 12 episodes and still ongoing. Okay. As a person who grew up with many incarnations of Turtles, it's great to see that they're still being made to this day. Even if there are some moments that are embarrassing and some moments that are not great, Turtles themselves always have had a great impact in the modern culture. And it makes for a great continuation franchise, okay? The Toyetic boom of the 80s is not something we should not talk about, okay? It was an idea that actually worked out into a lot of these things, okay? It helped out these shows in a way that gained more popularity. And a lot of these eras are considered classics. And while not every show and everything that happened with these TY properties really were great, I feel like there's a show I want to show you how they were as a part themselves. So, regardless of how, I do not think that these toy shows are bad. In fact, I watched all of them and they were all very good. I think that most people get the perception that Toyetic properties are bad because they're just sell toys. And yes, they are, but they still worked out as a good show. And I want people to remember that. Okay? Before we end this episode off, I want to give a few things. Okay? I want to give a massive thank you to the YouTuber Dan Larson, aka Secret Galaxy, who has done videos upon videos of all these shows right here. His YouTube channel link is in the description below, okay? I also would want to help out with other videos, okay? With all of these other stuff right here in facts, I would not be helpful without them. Okay? Okay? If you want to watch this again, you can watch this on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and YouTube, as well as Patreon as well. Okay? Come follow me on there. Every dollar helps me out with tutorials, basic intensities, and probably more time. So who knows if it helps out. I can also help give me more comments afterwards. I only have 3 more on the top of the band on the film podcast. Just like Bluesky every time. Bluesky helps me out in ways. Come follow me. Link in the description below. You should see there. Until next time, this is Big on the Film Podcast. This is Down the Rabbit Hole, and I'll see you all later.